Hey everyone, in this episode, I interview my friend Rich Coleman. He shared his journey into photography and how he accidentally became a wedding photographer. We also talked about the importance of taking a chance in yourself and starting even when you're not 100% prepared. Rich also highlights the fulfillment of helping people through photography and his transition into the education industry. He shares his experience working with David Moner, which was another person we interviewed in our podcast, and the impact it has on his own career. In this conversation, we talk about different aspects of building a successful photography business, and we emphasize the importance of surrounding yourself with challenging voices, building a team that will challenge and support you at the same time. Our conversation was very interesting, as it always is, and we ended up with talking about the power of synergy and the potential of photography into changing people's lives. This was a great conversation. I know you're going to get a lot of it. I hope you enjoy it. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Accidental CEO podcast, where we bridge the gap between the creativity you love and the CEO mindset you need. I'm your host, Nata Salvatori, wedding photographer and business educator. Find full show notes and resources at accidentalceopod.com. Let's get into today's episode. Hello and welcome to the Accidental CEO podcast. Today I have a very special guest with me who is very near and dear to my heart, somebody I work with very closely, and Rich Coleman is here today. So tell them who you are and what you do, all the amazing things you do, and we'll go from there.
Well, I'm here primarily because we used to date. I was Nata's love before Nando. So that's the official story. What we tell people is we actually met, what a thought. We met through a company that we both work for called the Photo Mentorship, where we help equip photographers to learn photography and learn business. And I think because of our personality, we just kind of clicked and mesh. Like I would say that. Yep. Hopefully you would agree.
Great.
But yeah, you were like what I would call an old friend or a fast friend. I've always enjoyed your no BS approach to life in photography and business. And every time Nata Salvatori does something, that's how I would do it. And not that you would ever need my seal of approval, but that makes my life simple. So if Nata says it, I agree with it.
I appreciate you. Well, tell them what you do, though, all the great things that you do and where you
I complain a lot. I get in my own head a lot and I get scared a lot. No, all that's true. It'd be funny if we'd scheduled this for tomorrow because I could have came post therapy. And that would have been very fun for you, I think. Photography has been something that I have always loved. I knew growing up that I didn't want to hate my job. That's something I saw my dad struggle with. And I saw basically every adult that I can think of what as a kid was like, I hate my job. And that was always very confusing to me because you give your job the best years of your life and then you retire and you're too old to do anything. So I knew early on that I didn't want to do that. And kind of as a former musician, I thought I wanted to play music, but I sucked at it. I found this way to still scratch that creative itch of music and creativity in photography. And I fell in love with it. Whether it was shooting products, shooting people, and eventually shooting weddings, I just always enjoyed the storytelling, the creative side of it, because everybody's going to get wedding pictures. But how can I do it different than Nata? How can I do it different than any other local photographer? There's a magical power of storytelling. Because to be honest, Nata, I thought all wedding photographers 15 years ago were 50, fat, and bald. And I was like, there's no way in the world I'm going to do that. I was doing weddings before they were cool. So I accidentally became a wedding photographer. And it changed the shape and trajectory of my life. So I shot weddings. I think I'm at probably close to 600. I don't know the real number.
Wow, that's awesome.
Anymore. But yeah, now I don't shoot anymore unless I really love the project or the couple. I just educate. But yeah, I spent most of my career in the wedding sphere of things.
Love it. Tell us, how did you fall into the wedding photography world? Tell us that story.
Well, there's a lot of story to it. I was in college at Liberty University in Lynchburg, a very beautiful place. I grew up at the beach, so it was fun to go to college in the mountains. And when you live somewhere like the beach, you take it for granted. So that made it fun when I came back. But in college, I was like, I've never seen a mountain before. This is nuts. And in photography in college, I would take pictures for projects. Like, here's the Blue Ridge Parkway. Here's a bird. Here's a, whatever it was to get the good grade.
Mhm.
And I had a professor, Professor Isaacson, who I should probably tell this story to. I took a pretty good picture. I'm not a very strong landscape photographer, but I took a pretty good picture of a mountain scene. And he looked at me and he said, Rich, that picture is great. Do you know what would make it worth money? And I was like, what? Tell me. He said, put a bride in that photo. And I was like, murmur. At the time, I didn't really see the significance in that answer. But people historically, up until this point in time, will spend money on pictures of people. I don't think I've ever bought a photo for a piece of art, but I've spent a lot of money getting portraits taken. I spent, money getting, wedding pictures taken. So I got married really young. And as I was trying to figure out life, I just started taking pictures and I shot weddings completely unskilled, unready, with a false confidence and vibrato that was just not real. And I was immediately blown away at 20 years old. You're going to give me $1,000?
Yeah.
Like, my camera only cost $600. You're going to pay me $1,000 to come take pictures for 4 hours? Like, that's sick. And I immediately got curious of like, is this viable? Because when I became a photographer, funny story, life circumstances included. When I sat down with my father-in-law before he was my father-in-law and asked to marry his daughter, he's like, yes. And then his wife came up, my mother-in-law, and she came up to me and was like, how are you going to take care of my daughter? I was like, ma'am, I'm going to be a photographer. And she looked at me dead faced and said, but what are you going to do for money? And as a cocky 20-year-old guy that battles with insecurity and imposter syndrome, I was like, I'm going to show her that I can do this, that I can make money. I'm already blown away. I think the first time I realized it was viable was I got married at 21 and I wanted to go like on a 2-week honeymoon. And I remember just booking weddings like crazy. Like, looking back on it, I was really cheap. But as a 21-year-old kid who's never had money, who grew up
Mhm.
poor, I was blown away. Like, the people, I'm like, I have $7,000 in the bank account. Like,
Yeah.
that's unbelievable. Like, I don't even know what does that mean? I used to bust my arse, working. I worked full time in college making t-shirts and doing graphic design. And I was making like, I don't even know, $9.25 an hour. And here I am doing something that's equally as rewarding and making crazy money for a kid. And I was able to springboard that into my wedding photography career. I dropped out of college when I was a senior. I achieved senior status and then quit.
So close.
Yeah, I'm not, I've had a lot of talks like of whether that's like I'm insecure about that or what, but I talked to some professors that I really trusted and really respected, which is important to me. Trust equals respect. Um, and they told me, like, that's crazy money. Like, you're going to make more money than me. Go do it. So, like, 3 out of the 4 professors I talked to were like, yeah, don't come to, like, don't finish. You're dumb. Like, if you can do this and hold on to it, do it. So I've always been a dreamer, and it's really freeing to like find something that I can like go for. Being a dreamer is great, but I feel like a lot of dreamers are stuck. Like, they have the dreams, but they don't have the footsteps to follow. And this was a way for me to be like, well, you want to be a musician, but that's impossible and really hard to do. This kind of seems easy. And I don't mean to make our profession seem simple, but I was amazed at like the cheap threshold for entry. Buy a camera, spend $1,000. As a photographer, you can spend $1,000 and make $1,000 before you even go to the shoot. Like, that's That's
Mhm.
incredible. It's such low overhead that it kind of blew my mind, and that kind of springboarded me into this like local wedding photographer.
Yes, I love that. I love the transition and, talking about not finishing a degree. You
You have
know,
like you have like 28. Yeah, you finished them for me.
well, but then again, here we are. I'm not using my doctorate degree, but I still have student loans to pay for. So, is it really worth finishing it up just to finish
Mm.
versus going after something that you saw as viable, as having potential, or something that got you excited? Because a lot of people just finish things just to say they finished, but then what? What do you do with it? And I did, especially if you weren't playing on. I stayed in that profession for 10 years. So I definitely
Yeah.
used, I finished because that's what I wanted to do and I did it. But I feel like at that point where you were found yourself, it would be finished just to finish, just to say you did it.
Yeah, finding yourself's interesting. I would say falling and trying to build the plane as before, like trying to fall gently. Like that's what I would call my
Yeah.
whole 20s that. And like, to be clear, like you're a super freak. If people listening don't know this, um, I often say, because me and you are similar, I think personality wise. And I'm like, man, I
Mhm.
wish I had started photography later because I just squandered it. Like I just did it and hustled. It was really cool to be a photographer. My wife didn't work for like 10 years and we had kids. Like that's really cool as an adult to like have
Yeah.
that freedom. But like I didn't know what I was doing and it was very painful. I will say I learned from my mistakes pretty good compared to some people, but I feel like the thing that I did that other people don't is I took a chance on myself.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's, people will have dreams, but they never act on the dreams. And then before you know it, they're talking about the same goals they had 6 months ago or 6 years ago. So one thing, it's kind of like stagnant water, stale water, water that doesn't move becomes really gross. So I've just always been trying to move and change and at least churn up the water so it doesn't get gross.
Yeah, we had another episode where we talked about just starting, unprepared, just going for it and which is
Fail
a lot.
fast.
Yeah. Well, it gives you that sense of urgency to solve problems as they come along because you're already moving. You're not waiting to solve all the problems before you start. You're just moving or you're already going towards the direction what you want to do. And then whenever a problem comes along, now you have that sense of urgency to get that solved because you're already going. You have no time to stop and just fix and make everything perfect before you keep going. So there's something to starting something when you don't have it all figured out. I think is very brave. But I think it's also what makes people successful because they don't wait to have it all figured out before they get going. Was there ever a project or a moment where like you were in your life where confirmed that photography was really the right path for you?
I don't mean to disappoint your listeners, but it's more of a feeling. And everything I do, like there's a moment, same thing when I started teaching people. There's a moment where I realize I'm helping somebody, and that makes it really easy. Like if you go in selfish, I'm just going to go make money. That's one thing. And you can do it. I know photographers that are very successful that just do that. But it was when I was inexpensive and booking a lot of weddings when I realized I'm giving these people pretty good pictures. Eventually, like some skill came in. I
Mhm.
tell people it's like a Marine, a sniper in the Marines, somebody that shoots the long gun. He's not a savant. He didn't grab a gun and like he's awesome. He spent time practicing. He went to the range every day and shot at 8,800 yards all the time. And all of a sudden you put me up against that guy. He's a badass and I look like an idiot. Like, yeah, I'm holding the gun, but I don't know what I'm doing. And the difference is there's trained and untrained. And I think that's very crucial because as you're learning photography, I was getting training. I had hundreds of hours of on on the job experience from weddings and learning the flow of a wedding. I really liked that. I really liked getting to be a part of people's story. But once I realized that I'm taking a picture for people, I'm capturing a memory that's actually improving their life. Like that's a great feeling when you're not just a picture taker, you're a storyteller, and you hear them tell you in weeks, months later, that's the best picture of me I've ever had. You're like, awesome. That was actually easy for me. Like, I'm not saying it was, you know, not a result of my training, but like it fulfilled me to do something like that for you. It's like you get to give people a gift as a photographer, and that's a beautiful thing. Whether people are taking advantage of you or nickeling and diming you, you're still giving them the gift of that memory, whether it's a family photo, a boudoir session before you have kids and everything changes, or a wedding. And you're just helping tell that story. And helping people has always been something that I've been drawn to. And that's why I was able to take something that was immediately gratifying for money and finances and turning it into something that I could sustain over, over a decade. So helping people, that's my favorite part.
I 100% agree. I feel like it's such a nice gift to be able to share with people. Having the ability to choose when you do that, and when you use it to make some money and pay your bills, but also when you just do it just to gift it to somebody, to give them that awesome gift. Tell us, how did you get into education? How did you
Ooh.
transition into that world?
I've always liked sharing knowledge. That's always been a part of me. Um, Not to flip the question on you, but like I got audited 10 years ago. And when I got audited, I was just telling people like, hey, watch out. There's this guy named David Stagg coming after you. And they're like, from me being vocal, they're like, oh, I'm getting audited too. And from that collective communication, it helped me out, it helped them out. And that knowledge helped everybody. People say, a rising tide lifts all ships. And that is such a true statement. But for education, I was doing some lighting workshops. I've always been a nerd. Like I'm the photographer that like takes something apart just because.
He knows
Because
everything about everything, guys. We call
I
him
pretend. I
MacGyver,
pretend.
the MacGyver of our group.
Yeah, David gave me that nickname forever ago, Mr. Molney. But I was doing some lighting workshops. I had a podcast with a friend, and it was just casual and fun. And I had a mentor growing up. I grew up on a very small strip of land, the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And not many people, this sounds pretentious, it's not. Not many people make it. People get really content in like the blue collar facade. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like my dad's been blue collar his whole life and he's great at what he does. But
Mhm.
like I had like a longing for more. And back 10 years ago, people were looking at me weird, Nata, because I was traveling to California to shoot weddings. I was traveling out of the country. They were like, you could have just shot an egg's head and made the same amount of money. And I'm like, yeah, but it was fun. And they're like, you're an idiot. Um, so just like sharing that knowledge base is good. And like when I was growing up, there was one guy locally who made it, quote unquote, a guy who made it. And his name was David Molnar. I hate to say it, but I love him. I probably love him more than anybody, probably his wife. I probably love him more than his wife. Tammy, if you're listening, I love David. David put me underneath his arm like right away. He was 4 years older than me. So I was a freshman when he was a senior in college or high school.
Mhm.
And I didn't get into photography till like 11th grade, kind of. And it wasn't till like my freshman year of college that I really did. But when I was looking for knowledge, looking for input, I was like, David made it. David's crushing it. David was shooting, album covers and making like 40 grand a day on photo shoots. I was like, yeah, why wouldn't I listen to that? But the amazing thing about David Molnar is he took the time to pick up the call. He took the time to answer questions. This was before he was an educator, which is funny because when he used to help me, it sounds a lot different than the help that people get now. It was
Mhm.
like, you need to do this, idiot. Like, because we had that friendship and we weren't even friends till like adulthood. And now he's one of my best friends. But all the big shoots I went on, whether it was for Google or for shooting, concerts or album covers, I was always assisting David.
Mhm.
And because David's an idiot is why I have a career. He took a chance on me when I was afraid to take a chance on myself. And there's been a bunch of like defining moments in my life, usually surrounded by a topless David Molnar. in a hot tub or something. There's one instant. I don't know if you know this story. This is actually pretty funny. We were shooting for Google in New York. It's called Google headquarters. It was for a project called Jamboard. And he hired me. I had just had my son. So this was like 9 years ago, maybe. And we did the shoot. I crushed it. I'm always nervous on big shoots, especially because I'm with the David Monar. Like, he's so crazy. And I asked him after the shoot, I was like, why did you hire me to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, when I look at you, I see more. I'm like, holy crap, what a scary answer. Like, am I failing
Yeah.
you? And he's like, no, he's like, he's like, I figured out how to not, trade dollars for hours. And he said, when I look at you, your relational capacity is through the roof and you're fun on a photo shoot. You anticipate my moves and you kind of just like go with it. Like, you're always working. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, there's no better mixture than that. And he's like, I think you need to be a part of, what I'm doing. And we talked about it probably for like 5 years. Every time he'd come into town, we'd smoke cigars. And he's like, yeah, I should hire you. And I'm like, come on, man. Like, come,
Yeah.
let's do it. And when I did it, it was actually a source of contention because when I took the job with David, it was actually a pay cut. I made less money, but the hustle really changed. And David started this company called the Photo Mentorship, and he taught photographers how to use their camera, whether it was a Canon, Sony, or Nikon, which is
Mm-hmm.
pretty different. Like, I have a lot more knowledge now in the fold, in the fray. And I just loved that, like, David was helping people. The moment that I realized I can just wake up and help somebody, because you know what the worst feeling is, I think, Nata? I think the worst feeling is feeling stupid or incompetent or looking stupid or looking incompetent. And there's so many people out there that, like, they want to escape their crappy boss or crappy job. They want to do something more. They want some extra income. And because of like a piece of tech, like a Sony camera with the worst menu in the world, it's really
Just, yeah.
it's really difficult. And David busted through that sphere. And it was really fun. I'll say it's been a crazy ride, Wild West. I almost quit like every 3 days. But like, we have 50 online courses on all types of photography. Like,
Yeah.
whether you want to learn weddings, real estate, like, we just have a bunch of badass teachers like Nata. So if you have a wedding question, like, I prefer you ask Nata because Nata's more of a badass than I am. If you have a sports question, ask Joel. So it's like this place of like collective learning and just helping people in real time. And, that's the shift in the draw. So my actual mentor started a company where he mentors photographers, and he hired me part-time, and I fell in love with it. And now I help run the company, which is hysterical to me because I should not be running a big company.
I
But it's the
disagree. I
funnest
disagree.
thing I've ever done.
I think is the great thing about it is because so you have that relationship, which is amazing, but also you think very differently. And I think he would be not smart to use a nice word.
Oh, if we
The
were off
only
air, if we were off air, I could say so many stories. But yes, I
so
agree.
he would not be smart to bring along just people that think exactly like him and would agree to everything that he says. And we talked about that when we have David on the podcast. Is like I think why part of why is so successful is because he's surrounded by people that would challenge his ideas, that will tell him that they are not good enough or they're not the right idea for this time,
Fight for
or
the best idea. That's our
challenge
thing.
what he's saying. And I think that's a huge thing whenever you're building a team for whatever company, even for if you're just building a team in your photography business. It's important to surround yourself with people that will respect you, but it will also challenge you and make sure that you are heading in the right direction. Because as the person that comes up with the ideas and the direction, we can get lost. There's a lot of things going on. As the visionary, it's sometimes hard to like keep focus on where things are going and how to get there. So it's great to have people like you on the team that will help bring things down to like a realistic
The worst
environment.
thing you could do, like the worst thing for my business when I was doing a wedding, is having somebody else do what I did. It would just be like all the stuff I'm bad at would get like exponentially worse.
Double.
I actually need somebody who's good at all the stuff I suck at. So it's like, it's a yin yang. Like, it needs to be like the perfect opposite to make it work. That will give you balance.
Today's episode is sponsored by PhotoBiz Education. Are you tired of empty calendars? Or worse, feeling like your revenue is capped? I've been there. The truth is, it's insanely frustrating to feel like you're doing everything the experts recommend but never seeing real results for yourself. Stop trying to follow someone else's path. Your business superpowers are completely unique from every other photographer in your area. Let me help you find the key to unlocking a wildly profitable business strategy. Check out our services and resources at photobizeducation.com. That's photobizeducation.com. You work with a lot of beginner photographers, people that are in the beginning of their careers. What do you think is the most important skill that somebody should focus on as a new photographer as they're developing?
As you're developing as a new photographer, I said it
Mhm.
earlier on accident, but it's take a chance on yourself. Because I was teaching advanced photography before David. Like, I was teaching people at my same level, and I'm not calling
Mhm.
myself advanced. I'm a
Yep.
nerd. I'm a nerd building things. And I took a lot of joy in that. Like, I took a lot of joy on like walking into a room, opening my mouth, and everybody got it. It was actually a pretty big shift to go to beginners and newbies. But I love them because they're so, like, if you get the right person, like, they're just eager to learn. They just want to learn stuff. My thing for people that are just starting out, I would say, is take a chance on yourself and take steps. Everybody looks at the mountain and gets super intimidated and then never does anything. And then they complain that they're in the same spot in life later. Where if you just learn to take steps, that traction really, really, really matters. Even if it's slow, like you give me a slow car versus a car going a million miles an hour but has no traction, that slow car is going to win. A walk would win. So it's like taking those incremental steps. Because it's weird, like, because you were in the photo mentorship, but you're like a freak. Like, you were so good at like a week. I was like, I kind of wish you would get into like crypto, because I feel like you'd be like the crypto queen. Like,
Oh my
whatever you get into, like you're really good at. Like, I want to find something you're bad at, just as like a challenge. Like, not a
Bring it.
can't, like,
Bring
yeah,
it.
not a can't bake. And I would just like, I would bake near you and be
Oh.
like, suck it. You're probably an excellent baker, is the funny part.
Bake. I can
Yeah,
bake.
take a chance on yourself. If you're a newbie photographer and you're listening to this, take a chance on yourself and invest in yourself. Nobody is going to do that for you. Chances are you might have had a bad family life where nobody told you you could do it. But you need somebody to tell you you can do it, believe in you, and challenge you, and tell you where you're failing and help guide you. You don't need yes men in your life. You need people that can mentor and shape you.
Exactly. What would be your advice to people that want to transition from amateur to professional?
Ooh, my advice. Very strange advice. Read books. That I think that would really help. It's a mindset thing. What I tell people a lot, and I'm going to talk to wedding photographers specifically, work your full-time job and shoot weddings to where you're making like double salary for a minute, and like prove that, oh, I don't need to work, or I'm going to go to 2 days a week. Like, there's nothing that says you can't work 40 hours a week. You'll kill yourself like I did. But you can you can make a lot of money on the side. So I would say cap that out, like really gamify and cap out how much money you can make on the side, so that when you make the jump, it doesn't hurt. You don't go from making, 60 grand to 20 grand. You
Yeah.
go from making, you're 60 plus 40. You go from making 100 grand to 60 grand, which is still bad, but you'll get it. I think there's a growth point. I feel like a lot of people have a hard time making 20 grand, but it's really easy to go from like 20 to 40.
Mm-hmm. I
And then
agree.
people get stopped at 40. And then if you can get to 60, it's really easy to go from like 60 to over 100. So like, I know that sounds crazy, but I've helped so many photographers. Like, that's just the truth. You're probably hitting a ceiling of some sort. So if you want to go full time, I would say do your research network like crazy. Like just hang out with other photographers, hang out with other vendors, and you like, man, I'm going to sound so much like David here. I apologize. If you have a uniquely crazy idea, that's like the best idea that nobody's ever tried, it's probably a bad idea. If you're doing something that other people do successfully, it'll probably work. If Nata approached me and said, "Hey, Rich, I want to build this crazy camera strap that also holds my lens cap and my laptop because I think it'll be really popular." I'd be like, "Cool, good luck." But if Nata said, "I want to sell shit online," I'm like, "Oh, that's great." Like, I know you're going to be successful because look at other successful people, other people doing what they do. If they can do it, you can do it. You might have shortcomings and need to learn and play catch up, but chances are you can do it too. People hated me here locally because I was actually a better businessman than photographer. And that really pisses people off. Like, but my pictures are better than his. I'm like, learn how to sell it. Like, people can get good pictures anywhere. They can only get Nata Salvatori with Nata. They can only get Rich Coleman with Rich. So I learned I have to sell myself. I could build a website right now and put no pictures of weddings on it, and I could book the heck out of some weddings because people book me. They don't book my work. David Molinar taught me 15 years ago. He said, people can't tell the difference between a good picture and a great picture.
Amen.
And he said, so take a good picture and learn how to sell it, and don't like quit on yourself. Like, start learning how to take a great picture, but like, you're not going to be like, okay, I'm good enough to make 100 grand. No, like, none of us were. When Nada was crushing it, like, she's good, but like, she's so much better now than she was when she thought it's a mindset thing. So learn how to take a good picture and then learn how to sell. Cause that's what owning a business is. It's figuring it out where your client is. And then it even gets more niche specific. It's like, where's my dream client? Cause once you get good at it and make money, you're like, you know what? I don't want headache brides. I want awesome brides. And you find out where they are and you find their clones and their tribe and you book those people. So
Exactly. Yeah. When I tell this to people very often when I'm coaching, a lot of what you hear as a reason why people don't make the jump to full time is money, right? So, like, I don't know if I'm going to have the ability to make the same amount of income. Am I going to be able to pay my bills? So, I'm 100% agree with what you said earlier. So, what I did is I worked both of my jobs for a whole year. I saved a year's worth of expenses. So I calculated everything I would need to pay all my bills, like my husband didn't exist. So if I needed to pay my rent and daycare and food, everything. So I calculated how much money would I need to pay expenses for a whole year. And that's what I saved by working both jobs before I made the decision to transition to full time. Because when you do that, there's no excuse. If you don't book anything for a whole year, which is going to be impossible, you're still going to have enough money to pay for your bills. And in worst case scenario, you can go back to whatever job you're doing before, right? So you eliminate those excuses. You first identify them. What is it that's holding you back from making that transition? Name them, write them down, and then figure out how you're going to address it. And once you do that, then what is the reason? The fear is gone. Like, you have to really identify the fear first and create a plan to solve that problem. And then there's no reason for you not to take the leap.
do you know Kirkland's law? I'm gonna butcher this, but it says something like naming a problem means it's half solved. Knowing what the problem is means your
Yeah.
equation's half solved. And that's so true.
Yeah.
Knowing what the issue is. And that's just smart. Like, everything you just said is just wisdom. And I'll say, on the other end, you can be an idiot and not do any of that and still figure it out. Nada is just a lot better than I am. I tell people all the time, she's the best of us. And I'm not giving her false praise, because I do not do that. I do not tell people they're good when they're not. But Nada is just I call her a killer. Like, I don't know if you know that. Like, when we're talking about like our types of students, there's some people that come in and they explore. There's some people that just like the freedom to do whatever. There's some people that just come in for the social aspect. And then every now and then there's a killer. And that's Nata. Nata's a killer. She comes in and like, she's the assassin that figures it out. So I appreciate, like, you motivate me, if that makes sense. Like,
Oh, you're so sweet.
I'm like, oh man, like I want to be that cool. And I mean that. Like, you're just really good at what you
I
do.
just want to be as tall as I am. That's really the truth.
That's true. Yeah. See, some short guys are insecure. Like, I really don't care, you know?
So I know you have dealt with burnout. We talked about this before. You went through a time when your wedding photography career where you felt like you're really burnt out. You were doing a lot. How did you work through it? Do you have any advice for people that are kind of losing their motivation when it comes to their creativity in their career?
I have a couple answers. I guess the first one is like burnout's real. My burnout was like a bit of an emotional roller coaster because I was the only one working and it paid my mortgage. So it's not like I could be like, I'm not doing this anymore because I
Mhm.
was used to making good money. So I was like, I became a slave to something that I built. And to be honest, I love building my company. I didn't really like managing it. Like that part I hated. So I just hired people to do that stuff for me. But burnout is interesting. And in 2016, I was burnout. I was shooting, 60 weddings a year and I didn't care. I knew I could like not think and be proficient. But it was really unfair to my clients. So I needed to fall in love with photography. So I took one of my old college roommates, Jeremiah, and one of my best friends, Ryan, and we went to Iceland. It was a bucket list spot. And we went to Iceland with like just cameras and clothes. And we lived in a camper van and squatted everywhere we went. And it kind of reinvigorated me in love with photography because I hated it. Like I was so jaded. It'd be like, oh, I have a wedding. I have to leave in an hour and a half for a wedding. I don't know the bride's name. I don't know the groom's name. Thank God for Honeybook so I can know what pictures they want. But I didn't care at all. And the moment that sunk in was funny. I'm in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. I walk up to Bill Molnar's house and I knock on the door, and Zach and Jody Gray answer the door. And they're like, hey, what's up? They were kind of like my heroes at the time back then. Um, and David wanted to borrow a camera. And he's like, oh, do you want to come eat? And I was like, no, I have to go to Kerala. I have to go to effing Kerala to shoot a wedding. It sucks. It's so hot. I hate it. And I was just really negative, not even knowing like to myself how much I hated it. And he's like, he looked at me and he David Monard me. He said, that's really unfortunate for the bride and groom that you have that attitude. And I was like, ugh.
Oh, burn.
And basically he was saying like, I hope that doesn't reflect in your work, that you're as obviously not into it as you are. So from that moment on, it gave me a couple more years of like, I need to try for them. I know I don't need to think about it. And I know I don't care, but like I need to go into it of the mindset. And I was never giving out bad work. I just wasn't into it
Right.
in my heart.
Yeah.
And that's why the transition to teaching went so easy because like hilariously enough, I hated video work. I hated video work. I hated video work.
Little
If
do
you,
they know what you do now.
yeah, like 10 years ago, if you would have said, hey, Rich, will you make a video and I'll give you $1 million? I would laugh and tell you to hire Chris Ellison or Chris Hannett or Nick McLean. And there's no chance. And now all I do are make videos and movies. Like my job at the company is I make courses. I filmed Nata's course. I film the mentors courses. So it's kind of like looking at it sideways. That'll give you a new perspective. And creatively, if I got stuck, I would literally buy new gear. I'm like, I'm going to buy a 135 and I'm only going to shoot that because it makes you think. It's like, oh, I can't go with my 35 or my 85 that I always shoot. Like now that's 135.
Mhm.
So like I would shoot, oh, look at that focus. I would shoot with like a 16 to 35 and a 135 all day. And I had other photographers. We were always two teams. I had multiple photographers, but like, and they were normal. Like I didn't make them shoot weird stuff. I remember when I first started working at the Photo Mentorship, a student told me I couldn't shoot a wedding with a 50. So I did it. I only shot the wedding with a 50, all one camera. I shot with one camera
It
all
can be
day.
done.
Yeah. And I was like, no, you just like have to push yourself, zoom with your feet, things like that. So I think there's a couple things. One is you need to like get the right mindset for burnout and get like, my pastor once told me, you can rest or you can reload, and both are important. But what he was telling me was like, if you're in a gunfight, resting's great. But if you're like sitting there and you're reloading, that's going to be better for you later. So you have to find a way to recharge. And it's one of those things where, like, we were talking man to man, and it's like, man, I'm not shooting a wedding right now, but like, I really don't want to be at my daughter's soccer game. Like, I love my daughter, but I'm not getting recharged from that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a vulnerable man talk. So number one, find somebody you can be vulnerable and real with, because the BS liar poser in you is actually hurting you, and it's hurting all of your relationships, and it's hurting everything. So find somebody you can be real with, and that's somebody that'll sharpen you. But yeah, you can rest or you can reload. And he taught me painfully over the last couple of years what that meant. So I find ways now I can reload so that I can go back out and give more of myself away to my family, give more of myself away to other photographers, to give more of myself away to my clients. So I think if you are only pouring out and don't have a way to pour in or somebody to pour in, you just have nothing to give.
Mm-hmm. I think it again, it comes back to identifying the actual problem, because there's different kinds of things that can be causing the burnout. I remember when at some point in my life when I was playing volleyball professionally, and I got to a point where I said, I don't want to play anymore. I hate volleyball. I hate volleyball. I will never play again. And then once I was, maybe a few months or a year farther down the road, and I was able to actually look back into the situation, I figured out what I actually hated and didn't want to deal with anymore was the people that I was playing with, and the situations that were happening in the team. And it had nothing to do with the sport itself. I still love playing volleyball, and I wanted to go back and do it again. It was actually the things that I was having to go through with the people that I was playing with. So it must be specific parts of that business that is weighing you down. Is it the actual going and shooting? Is it the all the back work that you have to do in your business? Is it the going back and forth with emails? Is the planning? Because you might hate parts of that and love parts of that, but you can't look at the whole thing and just throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? So trying to really pinpoint what's causing that burnout to happen, and then reloading, going to try to figure it out. How can I change this? Is this something I have to delegate so I can take some stress off of me and fall in love with it again? Or is this a complete career shift? Is it really something I want to stop doing? Or can I just pivot into education? Is it something I'm going to, be excited about sharing people how to do certain things, even though I don't want to do them anymore? So I think
Well,
really,
you're a freak. Like, that's your issue. Like, I hated emails. Like, if it wasn't for like software and apps, I would have quit being a photographer at like the 18-month mark. For
before.
real. Yeah, like like there was stuff I hated to do. Like, I used to get so stressed out about taxes and stuff, and I was like, why am I my own CPA? That's stupid. Like, I'm a photographer, not a bookkeeper. Like, what is it worth
Exactly.
for me to spend money on? Like Honeybook's a great example. Like, they could charge me triple. They could probably charge me $1,000 a month and it'd be worth it because of everything it's doing for me. Like,
Hmm.
it's like, because of that stupid piece of software, I get to do what I love, which is like take pictures for people. And I think that's such an important part because I'm a synergist, like everything has to work. And like an analogy could be like a guitar player is cool, but like, I think that's kind of a boring life. Like, I think it's a boring concert to go to, but man, is it fun when that guitar player gets with a band and is having fun with people. And that's something I had to hunt for locally, is like, I need to find friend photographers that I can just go and like, be like, man, did you talk to Stacy Q? That lady like ran me through the ringer and didn't book me. And they're like, I talked to Stacy Q too. She sucked. You know what I mean? It's like, like, there's such camaraderie,
Relate, yeah.
and like that's a great way to like deal with life, is just having like partners with you, like having friends with you. Going and doing anything alone sucks. Even people that say they hate people and I love being alone, you're just a liar and you need friends. So like, I'm sorry, you actually need to like have somebody that you can be real with.
We're built to be with others for sure.
Yeah. And having that in your profession, whether like, even if you're a mini photographer, mini shoot photographer, um, like there's people that do that. Like you guys need to get together and rub elbows and just synergize, get that static electricity going, because that'll keep you going.
Rich Coleman, I don't care what you say about yourself. I think you're amazing. And I'm so excited you came and be a guest on the Accidental CEO podcast. I know there's a lot of awesome things that everybody learned today. Tell them where to find you so they can learn all the good things and see all your funny videos that you post.
I am the idiot to talk about David needing help. I tell people all the time, David is like the lead pastor that's like really good at the meat, like the teaching, Bible teaching. And I'm like the associate pastor who's like just funny and like having fun. But people love it when like, oh, they're like, oh, Pastor Rich is like, yeah, it's gonna be a good Sunday. He's gonna say something inappropriate and it's gonna be awesome. No, I'm probably most active on Instagram. So I'm at the Rich Coleman. Yeah, follow me. I travel a lot for work, whether it's shooting for people like Nata. I'm going to Ecuador in 2 weeks. I'm going all over the place. So photography can be a passport to your dreams. So use it. Like photography isn't just something to give you an extra 10 grand. Photography can change your life. So figure out how to harness that power. Listen to smart people. Like, gosh, like don't listen to other photographers that are like bitter. Look up, not over. Look up at a photographer. Don't look over your shoulder at other photographers around you. And I will say very clearly, Nada's one of those people you can look up to. Look up to her. Her resources and knowledge base is incredible. So I just want to thank you for letting me be on your show, because I love being live with you. This has been the favorite part of my day.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you guys. And we hope to see you in the next Accidental CEO podcast episode. Bye. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Accidental CEO podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us in the world where creativity and business strategy collide. I am Nata Salvatori, thrilled to have shared this time with you. Remember, every episode is a step closer to mastering the art of being an accidental CEO. So don't miss out. Hit subscribe, drop us a sweet review, and spread the word to your creative tribe. Your next big breakthrough could be just one episode away. Join us next time for more insights, laughs, and actionable tips. Keep pushing boundaries, dreaming big, and embracing the beautiful chaos of entrepreneurship. Here's to make magic happen in your business and beyond.